Democritus, the laughing philosopher who denied choice. 2,500 years ago, Democritus looked at the world and saw not souls or spirits, but atoms, tiny, eternal particles moving in a vast void. Everything and every event, he said, is nothing more than atoms in motion following natural laws. If the universe runs on necessity, then so do we. Our thoughts, desires, and choices are simply the physical rearranging of matter in our brains. He believed people laugh at life because they mistake their own importance. They see intention where the cosmos sees cause and effect. To Democritus, free will was a beautiful illusion born from ignorance of physics. Even the mind, he claimed, is a temporary cluster of atoms soon to scatter again. He became known as the laughing philosopher for his good humor about this determinism. If everything is fated, why waste the brief movements of your atoms in anger? Democritus planted the first seed of a chilling idea that human freedom might be no more than matter pretending to decide.
Baruch Spinoza was excommunicated from his Jewish community at 23 for thinking too boldly about God. He spent the rest of his life grinding optical lenses by day and regrinding philosophy by night. In his masterpiece, The Ethics, he declared that God and nature are one, a single infinite substance governed by unchangeable laws. Everything, from the stars to a human thought, follows those laws necessarily. Spinoza denied free will outright. We only feel free, he said, because we know what we're doing, but not why. A stone flying through the air would believe it chose its path if it had consciousness. So do we. Real freedom comes not from breaking nature's chains, but understanding them. The wise person aligns desire with necessity. Spinoza turned determinism into spiritual peace. He was poor, quiet, and calm, yet his ideas echo in modern physics and psychology. He taught that accepting fate isn't slavery. It's the only way to stop being a slave to illusion.
Thomas Hobbes, The Mechanic of Human Nature, 1588 to 1679. Born amid England's turmoil and civil war, Thomas Hobbes saw people as unstable machines of motion and desire. In his book Leviathan, he pictured society as a giant engine made from individual parts driven by fear of death and hunger for power. Inside that engine, free will was just another moving gear. Hobbes called the human will the last appetite in a chain of cause and effect. Every choice you make emerges from prior desires and pressures you didn't choose. When you decide to act, it's not because you're free. It's because the strongest pressing motive won the battle inside your nervous system. For him, science and politics shared the same goal: predict behavior and control it. A powerful sovereign was necessary to restrain these mechanical creatures from destroying each other. Hobbes reduced morality to physics and freedom to motion, a view colder than steel, but one that still echoes through modern neuroscience and political theory.
David Hume, the skeptic who unmasked choice, 1711 to 1776. David Hume liked nothing better than pulling the curtain off human certainty. When he studied how the mind works, he found no inner spark of freedom, just cause and effect, habit and association. When we say one thing caused another, we never see a real power linking them, only the pattern of repetition. Choice, he argued, works the same way. The will is a habit of believing we control what our experience has already decided. Hume maintained that determinism and morality can coexist, so long as freedom means acting without external constraint, not outside cause. We are still responsible because our motives are our own, even if they're natural necessities. In his calm style, he turned fatalism from terror into science, the first attempt to explain choice without mystery.
Baron de Holbach, the Hardline materialist, 1723 to 1789. In Paris's Enlightenment salons, Paul-Henri Thierry, Baron de Holbach, spoke for the atheist minority with a bold smile. His massive book, The System of Nature, declared that the entire universe is a chain of physical causes stretching from the stars to the human nervous system. Nothing escapes this order, not even thoughts. He rejected free will as illusion and morality as misunderstood physics. Man is a piece of clockwork. When he acts, it is because he must. Holbach saw this not as nihilism, but as liberation from superstition and guilt. If our crimes and virtues are products of nature, we should reform conditions, not condemn souls. His determinism was so strict that even Voltaire called him too relentlessly honest.
Arthur Schopenhauer, The Will That Condemns Itself, 1788 to 1860. Schopenhauer took Kant's philosophy of mind and flipped it upside down. Behind every object and thought, he said, lies a blind, irrational will to live that drives all creatures. We don't own this will, it owns us. Every desire, from love to ambition, is a command from this deeper force pushing life forward against reason. So for Schopenhauer, free will was a fantasy dreamed by the enslaved. We think we choose, but our decisions only obey the character and motives the will assigned at birth. His solution was detachment, to quiet the will through art, compassion, and finally resignation. The pessimist who denied freedom ended up writing the era's first manual for peace through acceptance.
Friedrich Nietzsche took aim at the very idea of free will, not because he believed in fate, but because he saw free will as a tool invented to make people feel guilty. Priests and moral authorities, he said, used it to justify punishment. If you're free to choose evil, then you deserve suffering. He flipped that logic on its head by showing that every act is driven by hidden instincts and will to power, forces far older and stronger than reason. True strength for Nietzsche was not the freedom to choose anything, but the clarity to embrace what you must be. The wise man, he wrote, says yes to his fate. By destroying the illusion of free will, he freed humans from moral propaganda and forced them to face a rarer form of liberty, authentic self-acceptance.
Karl Marx, Freedom Buried Under Class, 1818 to 1883. Karl Marx saw human ideas as products of economic structures. Religion, law, art, each was a reflection of material conditions and class interest, not independent choice. He called it historical materialism. People make history, but never as they please, because their circumstances and tools shape every action. For Marx, free will was a luxury illusion sustained by those in power to blame the poor for poverty. Change could only come when economic chains were broken collectively. Not personal freedom, but freedom through changing the conditions that predetermine all choices. His determinism moved from physics to factories, making history a machine that even revolutions must obey.
Sigmund Freud, Slave to the Unconscious, 1856 to 1939. When Freud peered into the mind, he found a tangle of instincts and memories far below awareness. The ego, that voice that says, "I decide," was just a translator for forces it barely controlled. Repressed trauma and desire, not reason, choose our words, partners, and fears. He compared the mind to an iceberg. The conscious tip rests on a mass of hidden drives. What we call will is the rationalization of what our unconscious has already done. For Freud, therapy wasn't about creating freedom, but uncovering the determinisms inside us. Even our rebellions are scripts we didn't know we memorized.
B.F. Skinner, The Engineer of Behavior, 1904 to 1990. B.F. Skinner believed freedom was the most persistent myth of modern society. As a behaviorist, he saw humans not as authors of their actions, but as organisms programmed by reward and punishment. In his view, every decision is a response to conditions shaped by the environment. Change those conditions and you change the person. His experiments with pigeons and rats led to a larger claim about society. If we can engineer behavior scientifically, we can build a better world without blame or guilt.
His book Beyond Freedom and Dignity stunned readers in 1971 by suggesting that the concept of individual will belongs to faith, not fact. To Skinner, freedom is just the name we give to our favorite forms of control.
Albert Einstein, the physicist who trusted the clock of the universe, 1879 to 1955. Albert Einstein saw determinism not as a trap, but as cosmic order. The more he studied relativity and motion, the more he believed that every event is locked into a four-dimensional timeline, already written in the fabric of space-time. Free will, to him, was simply our inability to see past the limits of our own moment. He often quoted Schopenhauer, "Man can do what he wills, but he cannot will what he wills." Einstein's determinism didn't make him cold, it made him humble. He once said he felt like a child playing on the seashore, while the ocean of reality lay beyond him, vast, already set in its course. For him, understanding the laws that bind us was its own form of freedom.
Jacques Lacan, When Language Speaks for Us, 1901 to 1981. Lacan took Freud's unconscious and made it linguistic. We don't speak language. Language speaks us. The symbols, words, and stories we inherit shape every thought and choice before we ever decide them. He called the self a patchwork of desires and meanings formed by the other, society's grammar already inside our minds. Free will, then, is just the illusion of authorship. We say, I want, but the I and the want arrived from language itself. In his seminars, he once told students, "You do not realize how much you are spoken." In Lacan's world, the only real freedom is the brief moment when you see the strings pulling you and can at least recognize them.
Daniel Wegner, the scientist who measured the illusion, 1948 to 2013. Daniel Wegner didn't philosophize about free will, he tested it. As a Harvard psychologist, he used experiments to show how the sense of agency can be faked. In his famous white bear study, he proved that trying not to think about something only makes it reappear. He began to ask, if thoughts emerge before we can control them, who exactly is in charge? In his book, The Illusion of Conscious Will, Wegner showed that our brains initiate actions milliseconds before we decide to act. The mind creates a narrative of choice after the movement is already underway. Conscious will is a story the brain tells to keep the self intact. His work bridged lab science and existential terror. It didn't say we have no freedom, it showed we feel free by design.
1967 to present. Sam Harris brought ancient determinism into the MRI era. A neuroscientist and philosopher, he demonstrates that decisions form in the brain seconds before awareness catches up. In his view, free will is an illusion, so deep we can only watch it function. You don't choose your thoughts any more than you choose your height or birthplace. Harris argues that accepting this truth should promote compassion rather than fatalism. If our every action is the result of biology and chance, blame loses meaning. What matters is understanding causes and reducing suffering. His book, Free Will, sparked global debate, making him the most recognizable voice of modern determinism.
Robert Sapolsky, the neurobiologist who ended the debate, 1957 to present. Robert Sapolsky has spent decades studying how stress hormones and genes shape behavior. For him, human choice is a biological chain reaction. Each decision starts with a molecule, not a mind. When he collates genetics, childhood environment, and brain chemistry, what emerges isn't freedom, but incredible complex determinism. In his 2023 book, Determined, Sapolsky argues there is zero room for free will, not even a sliver. Everything we do is a predictable consequence of our biology and circumstances. Rejecting free will, he says, doesn't excuse us. It redefines justice. Punishment without choice is cruel. Understanding the machine could make us kinder. Across 2,500 years, determinism grew from a Greek atom to a neural signal, and the question still stands.
If no one ever chose anything, can we choose to stop believing we could?